Today on the Dolby Institute podcast, we've got the filmmaking team behind Spain's official entry for the Academy Awards, the incredible new film, Society of the Snow. We're joined today by the film's director, co-writer Juan Antonio Bayona, the director of photography, Pedro Luque, and the sound designer, re-recording mixer, and supervising sound editor of the film, Oriol Tarragó, who join us to discuss how they crafted this riveting retelling of the 1972 infamous air disaster in the Andes, where a team of rugby players from Uraguay had to do the unthinkable to survive. Society of the Snow popped up on my radar a few weeks ago when I started hearing people in the film sound community talking about what an extraordinary track it is. So I was really excited to get to see the movie in a proper cinema with a fantastic Dolby Atmos sound system, because the Atmos track on this film is really extraordinary. And I knew within a couple of minutes that I wanted to have this team on the podcast. So I'm thrilled to be in conversation with them today. We spoke on the morning that the film got nominated for a Golden Globe for Best Motion Picture Non-English Language. So everybody was in really high spirits. And while the film is indeed very harrowing, it is also filled with so much pathos and humanity. I wanted to start our conversation with the director by asking him what it was that drew him to this famous real-life story.
It was the emotional impact I had on Pablo Bierci's book. It was so shocking because I thought I knew the story, but the story was much bigger of what I thought it was. And the reading was so different because this story has been always so focused in heroism, in cannibalism, which are themes that are so small in the general picture, in the overall of the story. So there was a lot of space there to tell a new tale, Actually, the survivors didn't recognize themselves in the tale. The tale was much bigger and was so different to what was out there that we decided to jump in and start to explore what was still left to be told.
When you say the survivors didn't recognize themselves, are you referring to because the story had evolved so much over time and being retold so many times? I'm thinking about there's that amazing quote that you have in the film, and I know I'm not going to get it exactly right, but someone says basically the past is what changes the most.
Yeah, that's part of the journey, like going back to the past, trying to understand what happened, but also trying to change the way we feel about the story, because they keep telling us the story, focusing on heroism, cannibalism. Some characters were more important than other ones, That's not what happened in the mountain, That's only a small part of what happened in the mountain. So that was the challenge. How can we're going to be able to really tell the scope of this story when basically what makes the story bigger was not the fact. We knew the fact was this kind of like almost spiritual or philosophical layer that had to be told.
So when I first heard about your film, I think I presumed that, you probably shot most of the sequences that take place on the mountain, from the safety and warmth of a sound stage with a bunch of green screen. But I'm aware this is not the approach that you took. Can you tell us a little bit about the way you decided to shoot the movie and how you went about setting it up?
There was not an easy scene in the film, I can tell you. Not a single one, I can tell you. I mean, we had this cast of young actors, most of them unexperienced actors, most of them newcomers. And we go hand by hand with them through this experience. We shot it chronologically in contact with the people who experienced that in firsthand. So it was a luxury, to be able to tell the story that way in real locations, providing the actors with the information, getting in contact with the book and the survivors and the families of the deceased, and with the context to make them through the same emotions, of course, not the same, but similar emotions the survivors went through. So they were able to experience a little bit of hunger by following this strict diet they had to follow to lose weight, to experience the temperature, the cold by shooting in real snow, or this sense of isolation because they spent 6 months shooting in Spain, very far away from their families or their girlfriends.
Pedro, I wanted to ask you. I mean, I know you're from Uruguay, so I presume that you grew up with this story, and so how did you? What did that sort of make you feel in terms of the pressure to get it right and to be authentic?
Yeah, and for me, like when I was a kid, I already walked around with the book, right, with the Alive book, which was the one that was common, right, and I ended up having a friend telling me, like, reminding me of that. I didn't remember that when Bayona approached to me with this story, but beyond that, it was like it was. I felt it was about time to tell this story properly, right? And properly for what I felt that was needed. I mean, a lot of time passed since the previous movie, and a lot of time passed since the plane crash. So there's another level of understanding now. There's another level of also in the filmmaking craft. There's another level of things that we can achieve, right? And I think, and I thought in that moment, I was like, it was about time to tell this story from this new perspective we have now, right? It was one of those things that I couldn't say no. You know, it was like the perfect storm. It was a story about my country, which we don't have that many stories, right? And it's a very small country, and was with this fantastic director that I admired a lot, and I admire more now, and it was like, and then when I spoke with Juan Antonio, it was like, okay, I think I may be, you know, like I'm seeing the light here, you know. But it was completely fantastic. It was really, really, really tough to do this. You know, it wasn't an easy task, but I think the movie, you know, pays off. You know, when I see it, I feel it, and it's such a vivid experience when you watch this movie.
I know when you were researching, I know you went up into the Andes and you made a trip up to, I guess, a spot close to where the plane crash actually happened. I've read that was a very difficult trip. So can you tell us about doing that research? And specifically, I'm curious, what did you learn going up there about how that place looked and sounded? And so what did you come back and tell Pedro and Oriol about how to make this as realistic as possible?
You know, there is this moment in the book was very interesting. Right before this press conference they did to tell the world what they did, one of the characters is so nervous because he's been chosen to talk to the audience, and he's so nervous that he doesn't know what to say. And there's one of the teachers from the school telling him, just explain them the context. If you explain the context, they will understand everything. To me, that line gave me the clue, the key. So the first thing I did, I went to the mountain. Pedro was there with a team of professional climbers that owns a production company specialized in this kind of extreme situations shootings, the Venegas brothers. So Pedro went there for 20 days to shoot backgrounds, take all the photographies, you know, that kind of research that we needed. And I wanted to be there and experience the mountain by myself, because we were in this pre-production that we were rushing a little bit. They told me, you need to spend 3 days to get used to the altitude. Even though you can get there in 20 minutes with a helicopter, they told me you need 3 days because you need to get used to the altitude. Because we were rushing it so much, instead of 3, it was 2. And that was the worst decision of my life, because I had one of the worst nights ever in my life. The headache this lack of sense of time that suddenly I look at my watch. I thought it was sunrise already, and it only had passed an hour and a half. Uh, Waking up in the morning and discover your bottle of water totally frozen, like it was like a piece of ice, and suddenly you realize that it was one night for me, and I was sleeping in my sleeping bag with proper clothes. Imagine like what was for them 72 nights, 72 days with no preparation. So that puts you in the context. I had to be there. Then I had to be there to see the size of the landscape. So you can tell how epic is what they did. And the other thing I think is very interesting what you're saying is the sound. The only thing that you can hear there is yourself, is your own breathing. So I remember that as soon as I got signal, I called Uriol and I said, you really need to talk to these guys, the Venega brothers. They need to tell you about these specifics of the sound. It's very particular. It's very it's very fascinating. There is this thing that they call the train, which I didn't know what it was. But I remember that I was like at night, one night, I separate from the rest for 10 meters, 15 meters, and I start to hear this thunderous sound coming from the cliff of the mountain. And I thought it was an avalanche. And suddenly, that thing hit me. It was the wind. And they told me, well, that's what we call the train. It's the sound of the wind coming from the top of the mountain. So I was so shocked about all those details that I called Oriol and I said, talk to these people. They need to give you all the specifics of the color palette of the sound, because one of the challenges that we had is that we had very few elements. Only the fuselage, the sound of the iron of the fuselage, the sound of the wind, and the silence. But there was a lot of specifics in that color palette, in the way we were able to play with these sounds.
Oriol, I think that's a great time to bring you into the conversation. I mean, the thing that I noticed as well, obviously sound. I mean, snow is very absorptive of sound. So, tell us a little bit about crafting the sonic landscape of being up there on the mountain, because I love what Juan Antonio was saying. Like, you can hear the wind before the wind actually reaches you. But you didn't have very much to hide behind in this. There's there's nothing alive up there except for the guys.
Exactly. So soon we realized after Bayona call, so we did this interview with the Venegas that I've been skiing since I'm a kid, but you never lived, you never like passed days and the alpine areas, like and sleeping and knowing how is facing the mountain, right, in that level. So that interviews, we did a couple of them with them, and it was really valuable in a way of like this. We've been talking for like hours about just different kinds of snow. There's different kinds of snow. The snow in the morning, when it's melting, so sooner I realized that was just the sound of the snow, the wind, and the silence. When the silence, they said that the wind is always present, but when it stops, they say that the silence is so deep that your own sounds is the only thing that you can get. One of them said that you can hear sometimes the heartbeat, your own heartbeat, and in a way they connect with the inner self. It's they say that up there is just so you're just alone. It's just like almost a vacuum, right? So we realized that the sound palette will be very small, and the interesting thing will be like getting a lot of details, a lot of different colors of these 4 elements, and give richness to the sound, getting like a lot of different sounds. So we started recording. We had 2 winters here in Spain during the production. So we had 2 winters, and we record the wind in the Valley of the Dead. The Valley of the Tears. Sorry. We came back actually like in August, a year later, like 9 months later, to shoot again. So we bought an ambisonic microphone, and then we teach the Benega brothers and the experts how to use it. So they recorded on the Valley of the Tigre. So we got real wind recordings from there, like from 3 or 4 days. We got a lot of stuff from that, and then we record like a lot of snow here in the Pyrenees, and also more wind. And so that's step by step we started getting a lot of like recordings, and then we realized that Bayona wanted to give to this film a personal touch of like more introspective, like more like what the characters felt, and more like not more like what they happened. Of course it happened, but what they went through, right? So we realized the silence will be a powerful tool to put the audience sometimes in a moment, in a scene that the audience have to decide what they need to feel. You know, when you have like these moments that you don't have underlying the emotion with music or with a sound effect, the audience gets so uncomfortable, so they need to decide what is the emotion behind that. So we thought that would be a powerful tool, and also we thought that is an organic way to use it, not just like a formal way that, okay, we're going to do this scene like in silence because it's always been loud. We're going to, no, it's something that we learn from the mountains, and I think it was very useful for Bayona filmmaking or style for this movie.
Pedro, tell us about that trip when you were up in the Valley of Tears. I guess you were shooting background plates. Is that what you were doing?
We had a team of people that helped us, right? Another DP and people that knew the mountain really well. And we basically took the cameras we were going to use and lenses, and we shot a lot of backgrounds, a lot of wide shots. We shot a lot of helicopter shots about expeditions, people climbing, that we had these stunts doubles. We came back later to the mountain on the next year, because that on October 2021, I think it was the first time we were there, the snow wasn't that good, right? And we knew from the survivors that in 1972, there was a big snow, and the place was completely white. So we had to come back a year later, but it was great. There's a story about it that on the 13th, October the 13th, it was 50. It was 2022 or 2021. Juan Antonio, it was 2021, no?
It was 2022 because it was the 50th anniversary.
It was the 50th anniversary. Yeah, it was 2022. So
it was the exact day of the anniversary at the exact time, yes.
At the exact time, at 3:30 p.m., there was this big wind that picked up and came from the mountain, and we had to evacuate the camp. One of the big domes flew away, like half a mile away, and basically we left everything as it was. And then we came back to pick up those cards. But this place it's a dangerous place. And we weren't at the place where the fuselage was, because that's a real dangerous place where it's all the avalanches go through there, because it's basically at the end of a bowl, at the amphitheater, right? There's a glacier, and the plane slid down. The camp was 45 minutes by foot, right? So we will walk every morning, 4:30 a.m. or 5 a.m., like down the path.
Yeah, but it's funny, Pedro, that it was a 45 minutes walk in that situation, because some of the runners that were professional climbers will do that walk in 5 minutes.
No, not 5, but maybe 12.
Remember that day that we forgot a lens?
Yeah, and there was a guy running.
And we were losing the light. And one of the runners says, I'm going to run for it. And he went for the lens to base camp and came back in 10 minutes. And it took us, for us, it was an hour and a half walk to go to the base camp and come back.
We actually shot the guy with a zoom. We were like, wow, go longer. And the guy was like jumping.
So it was physically very demanding, because we had to build base camp 45 minutes away from where the plane was, but it was 45 minutes in that situation. I mean, because every you had to stop from time to time and breathe, because there is a lack of oxygen that doesn't allow to move that fast there.
Well, our friends at Netflix have been gracious enough to give us some clips to show and discuss. And so obviously we're going to talk about this movie. We have to talk about the plane crash. So let's run the clip of the plane crash. This plane crash, I mean, we've seen plane crashes in films before, but this one just is so shocking. And I think part of it is your sense of scale. You know, you have the huge shots with the wings come off and everything is crazy and the fuselage, but then you also have that extraordinary sequence when the seats are accordioning up, and you see legs breaking and very intimate sort of what happens to a body in the plane crash. And Oriol, what an amazing job on the mix. Like in the middle of all this chaos, you were able to definitely kind of like, we hear those bones cracking. So Juan Antonio, just tell me about your approach to building that plane crash sequence.
Yeah, there is a line in the book that from the survivors that says the difference between being alive or dead was a single breath. So that's the range of the dynamic of the film. You know, there is a reference at the first night during the aftermath. You see this guy asking for help, and in one cut, it's daytime and he's dead. That's referring to this idea, you know. But that's an idea that you can address to the whole film. So basically, we have two sections in the scene. One that is more about the tension, because we know that the audience knows. So we play with expectations, and you build the tension that something is going on, and very slowly you start to turn the situation from something that feels like fun and calm into something that is full of tension, and suddenly, bang, there is this big hit, you know, against the mountain, and this is the second section of the scene. So the difference is black and white, you know. So there's a sense of escalation in this first section. Slowly, by details, you see that something is transforming into this nightmarish situation. And then I remember one reference that I gave the visual effects team and Pedro is that section when they crash the plane against the snow, and all the seats were like move forward and trap all the survivors as an accordion. One of the funny reference I gave them was the shower scene in Psycho, because we are creating this sense of anticipation, and slowly we get to this moment that suddenly is like crash, 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 crash. You know, that's the dynamic of the scene, you know, and it turns that moment into something very physical. You know, because it was like common in all the interviews with the survivors that the worst moment were when the seats move forward and trap them into this kind of like mess of iron and flesh, you know. And that's the reference, you know, like this immersive idea of being with the characters inside the plane, not many shots from the outside, not knowing more of the little they knew, and suddenly this big hit that almost feels like the showering cycle, almost like something physical.
I love the way you play with dynamics. Before the big moment where the plane hits the mountain, you got that close up on the eyeball and the sound, you go largely silent. And so you're playing with the audience in terms of like dynamic range.
I think the sound work is excellent in that specific moment.
I think there's the contrast, like the dynamic of the movie. It's sound wise and picture wise. It's something that it's there all the time. We have to reflect the fury of the mountain and the silence, as we said before, the wind and the silence. Now we have this element. Bayona wanted to do this scene, have it without music. So we realized. I realized the engine of the plane could be like a good tool to make this build up and like infinite build up. So like cutting inside and outside and having these colors, but at the end it's just like a ramp going up. So also like inspired with the picture when Numa see the sun and the sun burns his face. I thought that build up could be like go to the high end pitch that at the end could be like audible, like mute, like silence. So we kind of like stylize, like make it like more the engine, like make it like in a style and an effect, like right, and we convert it like in a silence. So and then it's a very loud scene all the time. So you cannot be loud all the time. We know that rule. You know event after event. So you want to give like this silence to breathe, right? Audience to again feel what happened, and then you go boom to the next beat, and then you can go to from low end sounds to high end sounds. So you give dynamics also with colors. So that's more or less how we did it.
It tries to be a moment of pure cinema where all the elements play at the same time, tries to play at the same time in favor of the moment. It's a moment of silence, but it's also a moment of light. It's very powerful. We had this idea. Numa is this character that is so well. The memories of all the survivors were that Numa was an example of the excellence in the mountain. But the complexity of the film tells you that you have to keep some part of you have to save some part of the energy for yourself, because if not, you will not gonna make it. But Numa was unable to keep anything for himself. He gave all of himself to the other ones. So light was a problem for Numa. He was unable to accept his shadows. This is where the idea is coming from. Right before the crash, what blinds Numa is the sunlight, because ultimately this is what is going to blind the character. This obsession to be always so good that he's not able to accept his shadows. And that's a moment of pure cinema. Right before the plane crash, this silence and this light right before the crash is the calm before the storm.
I love how you talk about pure cinema, because to me, I'm actually even more excited by the sequence that comes right after the plane crash. So as the plane settles down in the bowl and stops moving, the plane crash itself is a scene that's is almost brutal in its realism and literalness. But then the next scene where the survivors are trying to react and figure out what's happened, what do we do next? It's almost lyrical and impressionistic, and the treatment of sound is completely different. Pedro, the way you shot that scene is completely different. Talk to us a little bit about that very next sequence right after.
Well, it was actually the first sequence we shot when we started shooting this movie, right? And it was really tough to do because we were very well prepared, but we weren't that well prepared to face all this chaos, right? You gotta think there was like all the 45 passengers inside that plane, some alive, some dead, all of the seats. Suddenly we found ourselves, having to cram all these, probably like 8-10 seats flew away with the tail. Like there were like 32 left that had to be in there, and they were like deformed and crashed, and there were bodies everywhere, and there were like, we had the dummies of all the people that died. That was, and we were like trying to put these cameras inside this place.
That was the moment, first day of shooting, that we realized how hard was going to be, because that was a portable soundstage that we bring from Belgium to the parking lot of the ski resort we were shooting. So we were able to keep the weather conditions in the soundstage. So we had real snow, we have the cold to catch the breath of the actors. But then we got into the set. All the seats had cramped against the cockpit, and we realized that we need to fit 29 people inside that space and one camera crew. So there was no way of shooting the scenes, like it was not possible. So actually that was the moment that we decided that we had to shoot the film as if it was a documentary. So we already had prepared the actors to know all the information. They were in contact with the survivors. They read the book. They did 2 months of rehearsals. And that was the moment that we just needed to let the things happen for real in front of the camera. And Pedro was so generous that he was there ready all the time to adapt to the situations as if we were in the mountains. And I always keep telling him, don't worry if we cannot shoot it the way we want it, because the way we can is going to be better. Because that's the way you will shoot real. It was all about at the service of the performances and the realism of the story.
Yeah, I know those imperfections that may happen that may sometimes drive us crazy as DPs, all those imperfections are the ones that make the thing more real. In the end, life, it's not perfect, and you have to embrace that kind of stuff. I use it in your favor.
I appreciate you saying that, because I feel, Pedro, like Juan Antonio was talking about how to, you have all these actors in this tight space, and you're having to be in there with a camera as well. And so I feel like that probably forced you into really using a lot of very wide angle lenses and deep focus. And then, but a seeming limitation you ended up using to your advantage, because it really gives you, a sense of emotional entrapment.
On this search of getting this emotion, we had these actors that were really well prepared by Juan Antonio and the coaches. And we felt it in our core that when we were like, if we took away a wall from the fuselage and put the camera there with a 50, it looked just that you were too far away. It looked weird. It looked staged. It looked so. We wanted to be close. We needed to be close. When we put the camera close to the actors with those wide angles, we finally felt, okay, here it is. And it was for a movie this size and this complexity, it was a very sensitive journey that we went through, of like trying to realize what we were looking by, feeling it, even though that, we had a lot of storyboards we did with Juan Antonio, and we ended up like most of them throwing them away. But there was a lot of experimentation.
We had to be all the time connected with what was happening in front of the camera. And remember this dynamic, this range of dynamic I mentioned was the same with the lenses. We are from very wide lenses that allowed us to experience the context. We talk a lot about cinematographers that we love from the 70s, like Bill Sigmund, the way they worked, the depth of field, that you always have the impression of being in the set with the actors. But then we were coming from these wide lenses to these diopters right in front of the actors, and it became very psychological. That changed from the wide lens where we can see the landscape, we can see the set all the time. From this moment that we are very focused in the face of the actor, with a very small range of focus, that becomes very psychological, because it's like getting into their minds. So we are playing all the time with that contrast, the same with the sound, the same with the framing, like going from super wide shots where the figures are small to these close-ups, or the use of the lenses from the widest one from the diopters, or macro shots.
The same with the lighting, because you will be outside in a bright exterior full of snow to an interior that was super dark and had some windows that was at night with barely some light.
After the plane crash, like Bayona said, it's like understanding what happened. For me, it's also like a lot of people died, but it also is like the death of the plane. And the plane, it will convert, it became something else. It will become the fuselage, it will become, so the sounds of the iron that later on will live in the movie will appear. And also we became, so we cannot be loud all the time. You cannot be using the same tool all the time, because the audience will get tired. So we had 3 scenes of people suffering that plane crash, when they realize what happened, and they just, helping each other. And then there's the first night. So we had like these 3 scenes that we have to measure how we're gonna play, of course, with dynamics, but also with the tension and the drama, because you cannot be putting the audience all the time like in the drama on top. So we decide to have this scene more introspective, also because of the way was filmed. So Numa is kind of like realizing first he's in shock, so we leave the scene from his point of view. So he's in silence, so he's inside and he can hear anything, and suddenly the sound of an iron seat moving, turns him, and he kind of like understand what's going on, but then he goes away, and then another sound. So the sound is moving the camera somehow. So I got inspired with the movements of the camera. So a sound of off screen is moving the camera, like the tension of Numa. And then later on the first night, we realized it's a good time to use music and leave that scene not so like from a noisy scene, more like from outside and from the emotion, Maybe Bayona can explain that better. But we kind of like measure how sound-wise we can approach and have different approaches to the drama.
Yeah, there's a sense of escalation, and how you use the elements playing in the scene. So you need to create that range, Like after being for so much time, no hearing any kind of music, suddenly you play the music and it has an emotional effect. It's about restraint and knowing where to play silence and where to play music. I think one of the most effective things that Oriol did is to give a voice to the plane. The plane sounds, it sounds almost as a herd animal, which is what it looks like when you see it from the outside, These kind of like noises that sounds like it's kind of like a huge animal, like a heavy one, like a hard elephant or something like that. I remember that there is. I remember I was flying, and I was recording sounds from using my telephone. These sounds where the plane was doing like or that sound like an animal, and I thought let's use those sounds when the plane is getting into the cloud. So it sounds like an animal knowing what is going to happen, like the plane is complaining of getting into that cloud because he knows what's going to happen, So in a subliminal way, you're playing with the audience that knows what is going to happen.
When the plane is alive, has his own personality, but when he's dead, has a different one. And in the middle of this emptiness or stillness, when we realized the fuselage will be another element, I thought it will be almost another character. So and it kind of react. I tried to make like tons of different colors low end for a dark moment when they talk about eating, or like bright tickling of a metal with like some like hope scene or whatever. So like in a way that the fuselage will react to the emotion of the scene. It's like it's not like music, but it will work like at least like that way, like in a background way, using the fuselage as a like a sound element.
One of my favorite moments is after the rescue, we had this moment of silence. You know, you see how all the survivors got into the helicopters, and with a bang, a strong bump in a door, suddenly there's silence. And we have this character, Fito, looking back with a sense of nostalgia to the plane. Because there was this line that I love from the survivors that says, "We never were better persons than in the mountains."
Juan Antonio, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because when I watched the movie again, I noticed that shot, that sequence and it had such an emotional effect on me, because what it told me in that moment was he had a realization like the next part is not going to be any easier than what we've just gone through.
Exactly. That's what the last minutes of the film are about. That moment, that transition, you know, like when he looks back and suddenly we go back to the fuselage, we go back to what was their home for 72 days, and there is silence. And you only hear the sounds of the plane, the sounds of the wind you've been hearing all the time. And it's this idea of there's so much life in the absence of life. You know, it's this like of contradictory idea. Feels very philosophical, you know, but these empty shots are so full of life, the life that they went through for 72 days. And what's beautiful about it is that music from Giacchino disappears, fades, and we only hear the sounds of the plane. So we allow the audience to fill the gap. We are not forcing them to feel what we want them to feel. We are just inviting them to feel that silence with all the emotions they went through during the film. And that's what I think makes it so effective.
Well, Juan Antonio, before we get to the end of the film, you're not done playing with our emotions and taking us through this extraordinary. We do have another clip from Netflix, which is the avalanche sequence. And the thing that I love about this is it comes right after a very lighthearted moment with the guys in the plane, and they're singing to each other and doing the verses, and not singing, but they're doing the verses to each other, and it's trying to lighten the mood. But then, of course, me, I've grown up watching movies. I know this is a lighthearted moment. Something horrible is probably about to happen. And then, sure enough, the avalanche hits. So let's take a look at this clip. Oriol, the thing that I noticed right away is the extraordinary treatment of sound once that snow first hits. And I feel like, did you bury microphones and contact microphones in snow? What did you do?
Yeah, we did a lot of recordings. Actually, we broke some microphones on the way, but we buried microphones. That was an idea that came along later on, and to have that black longer and kind of explain of and Roy Harley like get out of the snow on through the sound. We explained that, so we cut the outdoor. And we recorded on land, but didn't work. So at the end, what we did is like we built like a small box of wood, and we fill it with snow, and then with other materials to have like this low end kind of sound. Because in the real ground, you didn't get that low end, the energy would disappear, right? So you couldn't capture. So we did that in a box in the studio at the end. And it's a sound that it works to feel like if you were trapped inside the snow, and it worked.
And Pedro, obviously, this is what you were talking about earlier. Like, you go to almost total blackness in that sequence. You have very little light to work with.
Well, the avalanche itself, we go to black. This sound is amazing. I was blown away with that. And it gets to I go into sound. It gets to a frequency that's so loud. It's like it feels that area there and gives you a shock. Then we go to black, and then we see Roy coming out. All that part is like it's very brutal. It was really difficult to shoot, right? Very difficult to plan on how these guys are going to come out of the snow, because it was dangerous, right? And we need to take really good care of them, eventually we had to, throw ourselves with them inside the snow. So the camera operators were like laying on the snow with them and cleaning the lenses themselves, because there was no room for anyone else. And it was very frantic, and they got desperate for real,
I think you need to explain what was the size of the set in order to make them understand the challenge, because there was no space for the camera. I mean, we had a set that was 14 meters. After the avalanche, it's half of it. It's 7 meters. And in those 7 meters, 45 centimeters height.
And probably 2 meters wide.
2 meters wide, 45 centimeters tall. There were 19 actors, 8 corpses, and 2 camera crews. So imagine the difficulties. Imagine that the actors themselves are sometimes cleaning the lenses, and
we had to attach 2 microphones. We built like so we had 2 microphones on the camera. So that was like very helpful. Thank you, Pedro. So to have that, because there's no way they could put the boom operators. No, we have to teach the actors how to change the microphone if something was wrong, or they have a spray battery on the pocket, because you couldn't go inside. And Bayona wanted to keep all the time the energy and have long shots. So it was just like, real.
It was miserable, right? Because it was real snow. We couldn't do that with like fake snow. You are too close. Snow is flying everywhere. It had to be real. At the end, then there's the second avalanche that covers it all, right? And they go to complete black. They start using their lighters, and the lighters they very soon realized that they couldn't use lighters all the time. First of all, because they ran out of gas, fuel, whatever they had. And also they ran out of oxygen, because they made with a tube, they made a hole through the fuselage to get some air in.
Well, we're at the end of our time. I thank you guys so much for coming on the Dolby podcast to talk with us about the film. Juan Antonio, Pedro, Oriol, it's just an extraordinary achievement. I'm so glad to get the time today to talk with you guys.
Big pleasure. Thank you so much.
Many thanks to Juan Antonio, Pedro, and Oriol for joining us on the podcast today. And an extra special thanks to our friends at Netflix for putting this conversation together for us and for providing us with those extraordinary clips. I imagine that you will be hearing a lot more about Society of the Snow in the coming weeks and over this award season, so be sure to check it out as soon as you can. And if you can, see it in a theater with a great Dolby Atmos sound system. We'll have links, as always, in our show notes. And if you'd like even more conversations with artists and filmmakers about how they use technology to tell their stories, please make sure you are subscribed to us, the Dolby Institute podcast. You can find links to our show on all the major podcasting platforms, including the video version on YouTube, in our show notes. Or you can simply search for Dolby, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're curious to know more about the Dolby Institute, head on over to dolbyinstitute.com. There you'll find information about all of our programs. You can access the entire library of episodes of this podcast, and you can sign up for our mailing list. Until next time, thank you for joining us. This is the Dolby Institute podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Kaiser. Our producer and editor is Michael Coleman. Our executive producers are Amanda Schneider and Jack Ferry, with additional editing by Matt Nixon. Thanks again for joining us.